Can you see my screen, people?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, friends. Today we will be doing block 3, unit 3, multilingualism and cognition. So before I start with multilingualism, I would like to refresh about the language again. So, just try to imagine a world without language. Just imagine what would have happened if there was no language, even non-verbal gestures and sign language didn't exist. What would you do? What would your phones, television, radios, newspapers, books, and electronic communication devices would be like? Wouldn't that be useless? Because there's no language, you can't communicate to yourself, you can't communicate to somebody else, you cannot use sign language, you cannot express your thoughts, you cannot do anything, right? It's like, oxygen. I mean, that's what I feel. Because when you cannot communicate to anyone, it is useless to exist on earth, because you cannot express your thoughts, your ideas, your intention to others and to yourself. You learned words appropriate for situation and also learned the rules of pulling these words in sentences. Initially, you learned to communicate in the language being used at home. That is your mother tongue, right? That's how you're used. So first, whenever we acquired a language as a baby, we learned a mother tongue or mother language. That is our first language, which was communicated at home. Now, sometimes, you can also use two languages if your parents belong to two different cultures, two different communities, and it's like a benefit if you have grandparents who again belong to different communities, and also you can become a multilingualist, right? But more in most of the cases, you acquire first language, that is the language which is spoken at home, which is called as first language. Then slowly when you start going to school, you learn another language in a formal way in a school setting, that is called a second language. And when you go to higher and higher classes, your high school or your PUC, you also have different languages. You have third languages in your later school, that is middle school onwards. Then you also have foreign languages like German, Spanish, Mandarin, and many other languages, and you can be a multilingualist again. And if you look back, you will realize that your journey from crying and saying ma, ma, ma to the attainment of mastery is not just one language, but many languages has been fantastic and fascinating, right? Like the way you acquired first language, then the way you acquired second language, of course, there would have been certain challenges. But again, when you look back, you feel like, wow, I mean, how did you learn these many languages? So bilingualism refers to attaining proficiency in communicating through any two languages. Bi means two languages. Now, learning of more than two languages is referred to as multilingualism, what we will be learning today. So something like, if you know more than two languages, then you are a multilingualist. Chomsky proposed that humans have innate language skills, that is, language acquisition device within us, within every human. It is an innate mechanism or a process that allows children to develop language skills through which you learn one or more languages. Multilingualism is the knowledge of more than one language by a person or within a social group. It also assumes the ability to switch from one language to another in speech, in writing, or in reading, also called as code switching. So people who speak two or three languages, they can easily switch from one language to another very easily. Like they don't have to think, they don't have to even translate. It just happens automatically. Now, other terms that describes the phenomenon include, which means there are different names for multilingualism. That is bilingualism, polylingualism, plurilingualism, and diglossia. Now, what is bilingualism? Use of two languages. What is polylingualism? A person who is fluent in numerous languages, poly, which means many. Plurilingualism, again, same, more than two. Diglossia. Two languages are used under different conditions. Again, it is nothing but the different names for multilingualism. Multilingualism may be personal, social, or intersubjective. A person who can speak multiple languages is known as polyglot or a multilingual. Poly means, in Greek word, it means many, poly, many. Glot in Greek means language, and monolinguals is monoglot. Mono means one. Individual or personal lingualism refers to the ability of an individual to have competence in two or more languages. A person who is competent or who is fluent in two or more languages is personal multilingualism. One person, not group. You're talking about single person, an individual person. Social multilingualism, when languages share different functions in a society, tribe, nation, or other social group. Basically, it is the linguistic diversity present in a society. In India, nearly 200 languages are spoken. So India is basically a multilingualist country. In contemporary world, that is in current world or society, multilingualism is common all over the world, including India. Countries like Switzerland and Singapore are officially multilingual. In metropolitan cities like Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Chennai, etc., people use many languages as means of communication because when you take an example of Bangalore, you have people from all over India and all over world. You can also call India, you can call Bangalore as mini India because you find people from different backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, language backgrounds. So again, it is a multi-linguist state. Next, we will move on to structure of multilingualism. That is also types of multilingualism. So classification of bilinguals into different categories is important or significant depending on the linguistic, that is language, cognitive development, and social dimensions. Bilinguals were classified according to the distinction between the degree of fluency and competencies in the languages spoken by age, context, manner of acquisition of the language. So we will see different types one by one. So the first one is balanced and dominant bilinguals. See, balanced and dominant bilinguals are based on relationship between proficiency in two languages related to age, and also it is related to age factor. How well can you speak and write two languages? It is about two languages. And also it is related to the age factor. Now the first is dominant bilingualism. What is dominant bilingualism? An individual is more proficient and competent in one of the two languages. Suppose you know English and Kannada, but one of your languages more fluent than the other. So that is dominant. So the one which you are fluent at is a dominant language. The second is balanced bilingual. More or less equally competent and proficient in both languages. Now, you have a balance because you are good at both the languages. You can speak as well as write both the languages equally good. So there's a balance there. The second is early and late bilinguals. According to the age of exposure, maturational differences, and schooling differences. Now, what is early bilingualist? It is defined as the acquisition of more than one language in the pre-adolescent phase of life of an individual. See, early bilingualist itself says early means before adolescence when you learn a language, that is early bilingualist. In that also you have two types. That the first type is simultaneous bilingualism, which occurs when a child learns two languages from birth. Suppose you have both your parents, your mom and dad, who speak two different languages. So you are learning two different languages simultaneously, right? The second is sequential bilingualism, which occurs when an individual first already acquired one language and then learns second language early in Childhood. Suppose your parents, both your mom and dad, speak one language, so you learn first language once. Then second language, when you go out of home, when you have friends or when you go to school, you learn the different one. So sequence one after the other. This results in the production of a strong bilingualism because you're learning the second language after the first language, and again your language also becomes strong. Your hold on both the languages also gets stronger. The next is late bilingualism. We learned early bilingualism, which is pre-adolescence. Now this is late bilingualism, which is again either during or after adolescence. So which refers to the bilinguals who have learned their second language after the critical period. What is critical period now? That is during or after adolescence. Late bilingualism is a sequential bilingualism. Do you observe? Because you are learning in your late adolescence or during adolescence, which is not again childhood, right? So you're learning the second language after the first language. So this occurs after the acquisition of first language. Next is additive and subtractive bilinguals. It is the effect of language 2 learning on the retention of language 1. So we will be talking about language 1 and language 2. Now what is additive? When you say additive, it is like addition. When you say subtractive, it is like subtraction, which is minus. So additive bilingualism means a second language is acquired in addition to a relatively well-developed first language. So you already know one language really well, you're good at it, you have a good hold on the language. Then you're also learning second language as an advantage. It is a scenario where a person has acquired the two languages in a balanced manner. It is also called as strong bilingualism. So both your languages are really strong. You're good at both languages. Next is subtractive bilingualism. It is a situation where a person learns the second language to the determinant of the first language, especially if the first language is a minority language. In such case, mastery of the first language decreases, while the mastery of the other languages, usually the dominant language, increases. See what happens in subtractive bilingualism. Suppose you speak one language at home, just normally you're communicating your mother tongue. You go to the school next. So in a formal way, you're learning a different language. But that formal language, the second language becomes more stronger. You are good at the second language. So that becomes your dominant language now. So you become weak in your first language automatically because your second language is stronger. Your hold on second language is good. Next is folk and elite bilinguals. Now, bilinguals are dependent on variables such as cultural identity and language usage. Support of first language. Usually they support the first language. Now, first one is elite bilinguals. They are those who speak a dominant language in a given society, and also those who can speak another language which provides them additional value and benefit within the society. It is a language learnt in a formal setting through planned and regular instruction as in a school system. Elite, right? So you have a good hold on the first language, that is your mother language, mother tongue. Next, you go to the school in a very formal way, you acquire the second language and you have the ability to communicate, to manipulate in both the languages. Second is folk bilinguals. They are often language minority community whose own language does not have a high status in the predominant language society in which they dwell, in which they live. So it is like, you speak one language, like suppose in Karnataka we talk Kannada, but you feel, you still feel that Kannada is not dominant here. English is dominant. I'm just giving an example. So people don't speak Kannada, people speak English. And English is not a native language, it is a foreign language. Moving on to the next one, it is passive bilingualism. See, passive bilingualism is like passive smokers. So there is a person who is smoking, there is another person who is not smoking, but he's standing next to the person who is smoking. What happens? The person who is not smoking also tends to inhale the smoke and he becomes a passive smoker. Similarly, passive bilingualism means being able to understand a second language without being able to speak it. So you're not able to speak a language, but you can understand. Suppose you are in Karnataka for quite some time now, and you can understand Kannada. Though you're not able to speak, you're not able to speak fluently or not able to speak at all, but you can understand because you're there for a very long time here. So that is passive bilingualism. Second is neighborhood. Language is acquired in a natural setting, acquired through the interaction with people speaking different languages. It is like, you have a family and you have, your parents and grandparents, everybody speaking different languages, and you tend to acquire all the languages. Second, you go to the school, you have different kinds of people who speak different languages from different culture. You again tend to acquire naturally. So it is in a natural setting. It is not in a formal setting. So you are in that environment and you tend to naturally acquire the languages. So next we will move on to multilingualism in India. It is just a small topic. So yeah, we will quickly go through. See, India is said to be a socio-linguistic giant, right? Like India has a population of 1.4 plus, crores of people, which is huge and different from the ordinary, right? It is the second highest population, and we have like nearly 200 languages in India. The nerve system of this giant is multilingualism, right? Like how we say, India is a secular country. Similarly, India is a multilingualist country, and it is a social reality in India or of India. Now, Indian multilingualism is enormous in size with over 1600 mother tongues, reducible to about 200 languages for a population of about more than 1.4 billion people. With a population of many of the linguistic minorities being larger than many European countries, even the minority, who is minority? One caste or one community, which are less in number, even they are actually larger than the number of, European countries. Even that European country will have a lesser population than our minority. Can you imagine? Oral and literacy skills in multiple languages are necessary for meaningful participation in the larger democratic, socio-political, and economic system of the country. Of course, you need to talk, right? If you want to participate in any of the events, be it socio-cultural, be it in national, or be it anything. Now, starting with the mother tongue for family and community level communication, people need languages for regional communication. Obviously, you need language, right, for communication with your region, the national level communication, and wider communication. Thus, promotion of multilingual competence is widely accepted as one of the goals of Indian education. That is why when you go to each state, see, we have this three language formula, right, in our education system, and which is a very good thing. See, we are also learning a foreign language, which is an official language, that is English. Apart from that, we do not neglect our own language, that is our own regional language. And then we have a second language option like Sanskrit, or you have another option like if you're in Karnataka, you have either Hindi, you have Kannada. So you can just choose. So depending on each state, you have different languages. Multilingualism in India is a product of its history because we have a vast history and a reflection of its diverse cultures. Schools play a vital role in maintaining multilingualism and in changing its nature. The government of India has introduced the three language formula in its educational system, that is National Policy of Education 2009. It is implemented, right? Like it was not implemented then, but now it is in practice. So it is compulsory that every state government will have this three language formula. which means every child has to study 2 more languages other than their first language, that is their regional language. For the students, the motivation to learn several languages arises from advantages which might possibly act as incentives. See, sometimes if you have good hold of different languages, you also get jobs for communication and other things. So it also opens up job opportunities and other, I mean, that is one of the incentive. It acts like a motivation for a child to learn various languages. Next, we will move on to multilingualism and thinking. Suppose a person can speak and think in 2 or more than 2 languages. Do you think that person is more intelligent than the other? A person other than who speaks just one language. Like how do their thinking process? A person who speaks just one language, does he think differently from the person who speaks multiple languages? Or does
Yes.
this? Yes. Yeah. So does this multilingualism has an effect on intelligence, in a positive or a negative way? Let us just see. Does multilingualism make thinking in any one language more difficult, or does it enhance thought process? Let us just
And
see. The data are somewhat self-contradictory when you just take, when you just study, when you just do research, because some say yes, some say do, it is not true, whereas some says yes, people who speak a lot of languages are more intelligent, whereas some just say no, they are not intelligent. Anybody who speaks just one language is also as intelligent as the person who speaks lot of languages, right? Let us see how. Consider what happens when bilinguals are balanced bilinguals. Now, what is balanced bilinguals? Bilinguals means a person who speaks 2 languages. What is balanced bilinguals now? A person who is good in both the languages. Now, who are roughly equally fluent in both languages. And when they come from middle class backgrounds, let's see. In these instances, positive effect of bilingualism tend to be found, right? It is a positive thing, no? That you're good at 2 languages, but negative effects may result under other circumstances. Let us differentiate between addictive versus subtractive bilingualism. Like initially I told you what additive versus was. Additive means in addition, that is you have first you're good at one language, second you're learning the second language and you're good at that. What is subtractive? Your second language is dominating over the first language. So we have studied earlier, a second language is acquired in addition to a relatively well-developed first language in additive bilingualism. Whereas in subtractive bilingualism, elements of a second language replace elements of the first language, which means in subtractive, your second language is dominating your first language. It appears that the additive form results in increased thinking ability, which means if you're a multilingualist or you're a bilingualist, your thinking ability is increasing. And in contrast, that is in opposite, the subtractive form results in decreased thinking ability. If one of your languages is good, you're not good at both languages equally, but just one of the languages dominating the other, which means you have a decreased thinking ability. Now, individuals may need to be at a certain relatively high level of competence in both languages for a positive effect of bilingualism to be found. So if you want to see the positive side, or if then you have to be competent or you have to be proficient in both the languages. There was a study by Eleanor in 1993, the relationships among language proficiency, learning mode, their learning style, abstract reasoning, and age of second language acquisition. Like at what age did the person acquire second languages? In 227 adults was investigated. Now, the subjects, most of whom were university students, included 17 monolinguals. So there were 17 monolinguals who monolinguals means people who spoke only one language. and 120 partial multilinguals, and 90 competent multilinguals. For comparison, so when you compare, for comparison with competent multilinguals, the monolinguals and partial multilinguals were grouped together. All were tested for language proficiency, their learning styles, that is divergent, assimilator, converger, accommodator, learning mode, that is in what mode did they learn, whether it was concrete method, experiential method, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, active experimentation, and analogy solving ability. Now, native English speakers had higher analogy solving scores than native speakers of other languages. Of course, like if you are a native speaker of Kannada, you will be good at it, right? When compared to other people who are non-native speakers. So that is how it was. So the results were quite mixed. They did not even reach to like a significant level, but of course people who are multilingualists, they are better they are better at performing, and we will see their benefits also one by one. So next we will move on to benefits of multilingualism. So what are the benefits when you are a multilingualist, when you are able to um, speak many languages? Can any of you generally tell like what happens when you have an ability to talk in more than 3, 4, 5 languages, and when you are with the people of different cultures, how do you feel?
You generally tend to take on their perspective as well. You'll try to understand what they're thinking. You're able to think in the same way that they do. So you have incorporated those different styles of thinking into yourself, which makes you more perspective and very comprehending towards other people as well.
Right, Vasudha. So we will be learning one by one, and whatever Vasudha said was one among them, one of the benefits of being a multilingualist. See, they have a keener awareness. So they are quite aware, they're more active when compared to the others. And these are the study conducted. I am not telling it, but actually it is like if you just observe yourself, you know, when the class is going on. Now, the class is going on. Suppose I also tend to talk in Kannada as well as Hindi. People who do not understand Hindi or Kannada may be a little less focused whenever I'm using Kannada and Hindi, right? They tend to divert. But people who understand all the 3 languages, which I also know, you will be focused and aware of whatever I'm talking. So they have a keener awareness. Next is foreign language learning, that is enhancing children's understanding of how language itself works and their ability to manipulate language in the service of thinking and problem solving. See, you can learn any foreign languages also more easily. It's like, Kannada. So people assume that you will be knowing Telugu, right? So it's like, if you know Kannada, you will know Telugu because they are very similar. Then if you know Malayalam, you definitely have to know Tamil or vice versa. Like at least there is some similarities. And when you talk about Indian language, most of the languages derived from Sanskrit. So it's like if you just observe, no, you will be able to acquire more languages. And you will be able to deal with distractions because you will be focused. You have a better ear for listening and sharper memories. Yes, it is proved. Develop not only better verbal but also spatial abilities, that is your imagination also. Since you know the language, the teacher is teaching in that particular language, you will be able to imagine, right? Whatever the teacher's talking, you're able to understand, so you're able to imagine also. You're able to connect, you're able to visualize whatever she's telling. So you literally go to the world. They also generally display greater cognitive flexibility, better problem solving, and higher order thinking skills. They learn concepts better, the development, the creativity is better. Then they are good with code switching. That is, they can like switch from one language to the another without the other person having to realize it. And the foreign language learners consistently outperform their peers in core subject areas on standardized tests. So whenever the tests are given in the class, when a person who knows more languages usually scores better than the person who knows just 1 or 2 languages. That is proved. You can take your own example and think about it. They also possess extra skills in language use, like whatever Vasudha said. See, if you know like 3, 4 languages, right? Then what happens? You can gel up with people, you can gel up with your classmates, you can be empath, you can relate to them, right? So whenever they will be discussing something, you can actually relate to them, you can be a part of them. So, they will feel free to talk to you. So your social abilities, your cognitive abilities, your communication, your interaction, your socio-cultural, everything, just, you benefit in all the aspects. And also, in addition, research indicates that bilingualism may delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Next, we will move on to the next topic, that is acquisition of second language, which will be taken by Praharsh.
Thank you, Ritu.
Thank you, Ritu.
Welcome, Praharsh.
Now, acquisition of second language is one second. Let me switch back to the PDF so that you can also see some of the text that I'm pointing at. Okay, now from the PPT you would have seen, so we have differences in ages and situations and different level of competence. These are the short things, and let's go through it. Language are learned at different ages in different situations and up to very different levels of competence. This has
Praharsh, I'm sorry. Are you showing a new screen or the screen is still the same?
Oh, you can't see the screen?
No, I can't see it. I'm not sure about others.
It is stuck in the
We
PPT.
are able to see the same screen. It's still the older.
It's better now.
now
Yeah,
it
got
is.
it, got it, got it.
Thank you.
Okay, somehow, see, I had actually, today I marked main points like this so that we can discuss. Somehow those markings are gone from this part, but that's okay. We'll try to make it up. This has, of course, consequence for the way multilingual repertoires will be structured. It is thus crucial to analyze the social context in which the different varieties making up a multilingual repertoire have been occurred. Recent research has shown, for instance, that passive exposure to other languages during childhood can lead to an unfocused form of language learning and to a form of competence that can be reactivated at later stages if necessary. That means if you are a kid, you were exposed to different language, you lived from 2 to let's say 6 in Germany, then you are used to those words, those constructs of language, but you did not really start speaking in that language. You move back to your country. Later, if you go back to Germany, it's quite possible that quickly you can reactivate those that language skill. A significant factor believed to contribute to acquisition of a language is the age. Research has shown that some aspect of a second language, such as vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency, seems to be acquired just as well after adolescence as before. So even if you are little aged, you can still learn comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. The mastery of native-like pronunciation, however, seems to depend on early acquisition. So if you are learning something pretty at an early age, the pronunciation becomes native-like. In any case, there do not appear to be critical periods of second language acquisition. The possible exception is the acquisition of a native accent. So accent age matters. The smaller the age you are learning something, you get a native accent or native like accent. Everything else, the vocabulary and the mastery and fluency and all that, you can learn it at any age. Doesn't really matter. Adults may appear to have harder time learning second language because they can retain their native language as the dominant language. Young children, in contrast, who typically need to attend school in a new language may have to switch dominant language. And that's probably true for most of the cases. For me, for example, I never used Kerala language in my life nowadays. I mostly work with colleagues and things like that. So it must be mostly true for most of us. They thus learn the new language to a higher level of mastery. It's assumed that learning a second language is a series of cognitive procedures by which the learner progressively constructs the grammar of the new language, not only assisted by the language acquisition device, the LAD, uh, but also with the support from more competent members of the community. In the compass of language acquisition support system based on social interaction. So it's not only the language acquisition device, but there is also a support from the social system, language acquisition support system based on the culture and community where you live. Research on second language acquisition has shown the importance of a set of interactive procedures. These may be observed on exolingual situations that provide the non-native speaker the necessary help not only to communicate but also to continue his or her learning process. What kinds of learning experiences, one second, what kinds of learning experiences facilitate second language acquisition? There is no single correct answer to this question. One reason is that each individual language learner brings distinctive cognitive abilities and knowledge to the language learning experience. So the sample size you are going to use for this experiment or answering that question will be drastically different. In addition, the kinds of learning experiences that facilitate second language acquisition should match the context and uses for the second language once it is acquired. So we cannot say what are the exact procedures by which you can easily learn a new language. For example, consider four different individuals. We are the younger child. Okay, so coming from my sister.
Shankar.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, it's okay. For example, consider four different individuals. Ria, a young child, may not need to master a wealth of vocabulary and complex syntax to get along with other children. If she can master the phonology, some simple syntactical rules, and some basic vocabulary, she may be considered fluent. Similarly, Kishan needs only to get by in a few everyday situations such as shopping, handling routine family business transactions, and getting around the town. He may be considered proficient after mastering some simple vocabulary and syntax as well as some pragmatic knowledge regarding context appropriate manners of communication. Again, he's a little elder kid. Now, another case, Meenakshi must be able to communicate regarding her specialized technical field. She may be considered proficient if she masters the technical vocabulary, a primitive basic vocabulary, and rudiments of syntax. This could be like a teacher or our Anju, where she can be considered very fluent if she knows that particular language structure for her particular job. Now, for a student, let's say Sumesh, who studied a second language in academic setting, Sumesh may be expected to have a firm grasp on syntax and rather broad, if shallow, vocabulary. Each of these language learners may require different kinds of language experiences to gain proficiency being sought. Different kinds of experiences may be needed to enhance their competence in the phonology, vocabulary, syntax, and pragmatic of the second language. When speakers of one language learn other languages, they find the languages differentially difficult. For example, it is much easier on average for a native speaker of English to acquire Spanish as a second language than to acquire Russian, because the structure and things like that is probably correlated. One reason is that English and Spanish share more root words than do English and Russian. Moreover, Russian is much more highly inflected than are English and Spanish. English and Spanish are more highly dependent on word order. The different difficulty of learning language as a second language, however, does not appear to have much to do with the difficulty of the first language. So basically what it's saying is the second language depends more on the first language itself, not the difficulty level of the first language. If I am learning Tamil, since I am from Kerala background, I know many words of Tamil already. I know the structure of the language is almost like Kerala language, things like that. If I am learning A different language called probably Spanish, where things are totally different. The roots are different. The language structure is different. It will be definitely tougher for me. Now we had two more. So far we have covered how the process happens, but now we will say two different inconclusive theories about how brain actually processes our multiple languages. So one way of approaching multilingualism is to apply what we learned from cognitive psychological research of practical concerns, how the brain stores it, or how is the whole process happening in the brain. Another approach is, one is cognitive, the other one is to see in a human mind, insight into human mind. For example, some cognitive psychologists have been interested in finding out how the different languages are represented in a multilingual person's mind. So there are two ways of looking at it. One is a single system, one is a dual system. Single system says all the languages goes into the same brain mechanism, and only one area of brain is responsible for storing all the languages. The dual system on the other side says that if you have two languages, it will be stored in different represented somehow in separate systems of mind, even locations in the brain. Now, how do you decide which of these concepts are true? Naturally, we'll go back to our old people. One who got hit by a taxi or something, and he got knocked off. His brain is partially in jeopardized. We'll try to see how he remembers the old two languages, or how much he can recover those languages, right? So if the languages are recovered in a different rate, we can say that two languages are stored and processed in different order, different places, etc. in the brain. But after all the studies, what was concluded is that we basically cannot conclude anything. Some people recovered faster on the first language, some people recovered faster on the second language. There was no perfect correlation in any direction. So this could not conclude anything in terms of how the language is processed in the brain. Then the conclusions cannot be made. It was all equivocal. Nevertheless, the results seem to suggest that at least some duality of structure, some duality, not complete. So it is probably in a common place, but most of the multiple languages, they share some unique features also. A different method of study has led to an alternative perspective of multilingualism. It says two investigators mapped the region of cerebral cortex relevant to language use in two of the bilingual patients being treated for epilepsy. Mild electrical stimulations were applied to the cortex of each patient. What happens when electrical shock is given is that area, the electrical stimulation will inhibit the activity where it's applied. It leads to a reduced activity to name the objects for which the memories are stored at the location being stimulated. The results of both the patients again were same, so they couldn't again conclude anything. The result of the study suggests some aspect of two language may be represented singly. Other aspect may be represented separately. So some aspect in a common network in the brain, other aspects separately. But again, there are no conclusions on which aspect where, etc., etc. Now there is another entry of the neural people. Then people thought, okay, we'll scan the entire brain using some magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and we'll find out which parts of the brain are getting more excited or more or less active, etc., when we are dealing with multiple languages. And that will tell us something about how the brain is storing and processing languages. Answers to question like whether there's a difference between balanced and unbalanced bilinguals, whether there is a relation between neuronal network constructed when sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, whether there is a relation between the neuronal network constructed when learning a second language and the classical, that's the first language center, whether the first be integrated into latter and the whether. So if this sentence is a little confusing, so ignore this part. Basically, what it says is that when we have a original language constructed in the brain, the classical language center, if when you are going for the second language, is it going to enhance the same language center and process things in the same area, or is it going to a new location in the brain? The research findings in the neuroanatomy of bilinguals are still contradictory, and the analysis of cases of bilingual speech used by speakers with different kinds of multilingual competencies could shed new light on these questions. Early bilinguals, that is when kids are little chotus and they are learning languages, seem to build up network in sufficiently adaptable to allow the integration of later acquired languages. So if you learn a new language, multiple languages when you are a kid, later you can actually acquire more languages easily. Late bilinguals have to establish new neural areas to guarantee development of the late acquired languages. It's a little difficult for them because they have to establish new neural areas. These results could have an important impact on the structure of the integrated language theory. Such a theory will consider multilingual repertoire and their use in different contexts, the default case, monolingual competencies, and monolingual speech representing just one of the many cases to be explained. This whole sentence is a little confusing and out of grammar, but what it says is that this is the main point. The age at which you learn the new languages, that opens up arena for you to create opportunity for yourself for later adapting to new languages. It's more if you are doing it in an early age. If you have if you know multiple languages when you're a kid, later you can learn more languages more easily. That's pretty much what this covers. Back to Ritu now. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I want to ask something, not just for you, like in general, we learn so many theories and models which researchers are coming up with, and most of the cases they tell it's not proven, or there's no conclusion. Why are we learning these then? Like, I'm really curious to know this.
Okay, I can probably give you some ideas, but I'm not an expert. See, we still have to say what is done and what is pending. So these are probably some of the researches that you and I can take up when we go into PhD or something like that. So these are important things to know also. For example, if somebody is having a problem, got a problem in the brain, how do you train them to at least retrieve one of the ability of one of the languages back quickly? We don't know that yet. That could be answered if we actually conclude on this developments, right? So there is more research pending on this. You and I might be able to develop some new techniques by which we can measure something else and say that okay, this might be the reason, something of the sort.
May I know
May
who
I
asked
add
this
something?
question?
Yeah,
Yes,
Shruti, I asked.
Shruti,
Okay,
hi Shruti. So
Shruti.
your question was, why are we learning multiple languages? Was that your question?
No, in general, like entire cognitive when we are studying. That's why I told it's not just for Prash. Like, it's generally, I'm very curious to know this. We are
Okay,
learning.
regarding language, right? But regarding language in
No,
general.
not regarding language in general.
No, I think what
Okay,
basically
guys,
she's saying,
May I
yeah,
try? May I try this? Okay, see, what happens is these, though these theories are not complete, there are many theories that have been done apart from the ones we are learning, just to say. But these theories have come up to us only because they're giving us a direction at something. They might not be proven, they might be proven. That is a different issue altogether. But it is a direction of thought. And it is for us to further dig up and find out. As Praharsh says, when we go to PhD and we try doing PhD, maybe we can pick up on these topics and try proving them or disproving them. But the point here is it is trying to get us to think in that particular direction so that we know where we have to go. It might not be completely proved, but it is for us to find out why or why not.
Okay. Thank you.
Vasudha. It's like a research,
Yeah.
so we already have some data, so we can move we can move further at least.
So these theories can be used as guidelines for those
Yes, they're like
researchers.
guidance. Yes.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I'm clear now. At least it makes more sense now. Thank you,
Yes,
guys.
thank you, Vasudha. Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
should we move on to the next topic, or we should stop the recording and then I'll just go through, very quickly, because they haven't asked this, but anyways, it is good to know whatever is there. Never know.
No, let it get recorded.
Okay, yeah. So the last topic for the day is multilingualism and cognition. So we already saw the benefits of multilingualism and how it is benefiting our cognitive abilities, right? So we'll just go through quickly once. Say in today's world, we also see that people who are able to communicate more languages, they have, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so they have good memory power. In addition to facilitating cross-cultural communication, this trend also positively affects cognitive abilities. Researchers have shown that the bilingual brain can have better attention. Like I told you, you become more attentive when you are a bilingual, and task switching capacities than the monolingual brain. Bilingualism has positive effects at both ends of the age spectrum. Bilingual children as young as 7 months can adjust better to environmental changes, while bilingual seniors can experience less cognitive decline. Like we studied that, in Alzheimer's disease, like this bilingual or multilingual actually helps. Multilingualism is a positive force that enhances children's linguistic development as well, right? Multilingualism outperform monolinguals on non-verbal tasks requiring attention and control. Better executive control abilities at the center of intellect thought. So there are three things we will be studying here, that is relations between languages and their users. First one, the second is mixing is rule governed two. The third is multilingualism. No, the third is rule governed language choice. So first one is relations between languages and their users. Now, what is languages and what is users? Who are the users? And what is language? Who is using the language? Users, right? We are the users. Who is using the languages are the users. So what is the relationship between them? What is the relationship between the language and the users who are using the language? So a state of multilingualism can be achieved naturally, right? You can learn any languages naturally, like I told you. If you have both the parents and mom and dad both speaking two different languages, then you become a bilingual. And you have grandparents who again speak two different languages. So in your house, you see that four different languages are spoken. So you naturally acquire all the languages, all the four languages, and you become a multilingualist. So that is how that is the relationship between a language and the users. And there are three recent issues about multilingualism which are briefly given. So we'll quickly go through. The first one is code switching. Like I told you, if you are good at two different languages and you're able to switch from one language to another without any interruption, without any people having to find out about it. It is the ability of multilinguals to select words from either of their languages during the course of uttering a sentence. So whenever you're talking, it is your ability, your skill, that how you use another language in one particular language. And what is, something very fascinating about code switching is it requires no additional time. You don't have to think. You don't have to say, hey, wait, let me think. No, you actually do it automatically. So it happens. And it
The
takes
perfect example, sorry, Ritu, can I the perfect example is when you're stuck on some word, when you're trying to talk in English or in a different languages, when you're a multilingualist, when you're stuck at that particular word, you immediately start thinking in your own mother tongue and the word comes in automatically. This is one of the best examples that you can find in your day-to-day life itself.
Yeah, thank you, Vasudha. I can give certain examples. So the first is like dial kiya gaya number abhi vyast hai. Now you see dial and number, both the words are English, which is used in a Hindi language, right? So you're using two languages and you're combining or actually mixing them without even having to realize, and it sounds so perfect. The next example is, अरे ये subject इतना important है. isko padho. So you see the subject and important. Again, both are English and you're actually speaking Hindi, whereas you're using English, or you can also use Kannada, is subject gottilla and all that, you know. It is very difficult and all that. So we will move on to the second issue, that is language familiarity. So what is language familiarity? It influences a person's ability to correctly identify another person's voice. Now, you know what? Even in my dreams, if I hear Seema's voice, I can identify it as Seema, whether she talks in English, whether she talks in Hindi, or I have not heard her speaking another language, but I can identify. I can identify even Prahash's or Ritika's or many other people's voice who are speaking in 2-3 different languages, and I hear them, you know, more often. So that is how it is. Even if they talk in 2 different languages, we can still identify their voice. Whereas a person who knows only one language, who do not know the other languages, will not be able to identify their voice when they speak in other languages where the monolingual is not aware of. Are you getting it? Yeah.
No,
So,
I didn't get the point, Ritu.
yeah. See, when I speak about language familiarity, so what happens? See, if a person is talking, now you talk, right? I cannot see you. Even if I don't see your name, I know it is you. You speak in English, I can still identify your voice. You speak in Hindi, I can still identify your voice. You sing a song, I can identify, I can say this is Seema. When Ritika speaks in English or Hindi, I can still tell it is Ritika's or Praharsh's voice. I can differentiate. Why? Because I also know those languages. Suppose you are speaking in a different language which I have not heard. Suppose you speak in Telugu and I don't know Telugu. So what happens? You speak in Telugu and I am a monolingual. I just know one language, that is English. So if you talk in Telugu, I will not be able to identify your voice. So that also plays a vital role. Getting it?
Yeah, I got it. I'm just wondering if this is how it happens. Anyway, you carry on. We can discuss after the recording.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. The next is treatment of lexical, that is related to grammar. The third important issue is the treatment of lexical and semantic knowledge by multilinguals. So because we are discussing about multilinguals. So lexical is nothing but grammatical, and semantic is again language. So again, like, you know, literature and the use of the language and grammar. And it is proved that, you know, multilinguals have an advantage over monolinguals in like different terms. See, they can easily relate, like when Vasudha gave an example that, you know, if you are able to talk in many languages and you're sitting with another group from, you know, each person is speaking in different languages. So what happens? You easily gel up with them, right? Because you can relate to them. You also know the rules of the language. You are also good at grammar. Then words are similar, right? That's how you're able to acquire again different language, and you're good at observation. So these are just the advantages. And again, you're good at memorizing. I mean, your memory power is good. You have a good memory storage. Then the second issue is ruled governed language choice. So what happens here? So a multilingual person makes an appropriate choice of language from among the variety that constitute his collection or stock of languages. Suppose you know 2 or 3 languages. It is your choice what language you want to communicate in what situation. Now see, when I am talking, just because I am teaching here, I am talking very formally. At least I am trying to talk very formally. But once the session gets over, our tone changes, right? The way we talk change. It's like we combine 2-3 languages and talk. Suppose you happen to meet a minister, you talk in a very formal manner. You meet your friend, you happen to talk in a different manner, your tone changes. With your friends, you talk differently. With your family, you talk differently. With your teachers or with different people. And it's your choice whether you want to change the language, change the tone and everything. So that is rule governed language choice. It is your choice. And again, there are rules in the language also, and it just happens. The way we behave during and after the class, right? This is one best example I can give. The last one is mixing is rule governed too. Even if you mix 2 different languages, again, you follow the rule. No, you cannot like rule as in grammar and everything. You just don't talk something which is not valid or accurate. There are rules and norms that overlap single languages and govern the harmonic, that is grammatical mixing of elements from different languages. The speaker can also scan both of the lexica to search the appropriate words for what he wants to say and fill the gap of words he does not know, that is momentarily not accessible in the matrix language. So what happens, suppose like you're talking something, I am talking something, and I just forget what I want to, talk next. So I just fill the gap because I'm good at the other languages also. You wouldn't even realize when I actually, I bought in some gap, and I still bought, in the meanwhile, in that gap, I found the word and I used it. I just mixed. So there are again rules here also. See, so these are the issues. Yeah, Ritika, could you just stop the recording?